So iComply Investor Services, iComply ICO, iComply ID, you might see us in the marketplace. We're focused on compliance for decentralized markets, decentralized financial services. What does that mean? I'm curious who in the room has heard of Bitcoin? Show of hands. Who in the room has ever bought or sold any type of cryptocurrency? Cool. So we got like about a half that have actually engaged, and some of you that have heard it and been like, man, the rest of you guys are crazy. So there's a lot of problems within the cryptocurrency space, and I like to kind of sum it up in that, and I will just cover this off the legal side because we'll talk a little bit about where we're going as a company, but the problems in the space really can be kind of boiled down to the fact that in the financial services world, banking and et cetera, there's a lot of standards around your privacy, which we know Wells Fargo didn't do a very good job of. If you saw what happened there. We also know that there's standards for cybersecurity. We've also seen that there's been major breaches in things like Equifax. And we see all these different standards that are held and required in the financial services world. And then we see the Wild West of the ICO space, which is kind of operating over here. So our ethos and our focus as a company is really to help bridge that gap between those two spaces and to try to use this technology in a way and build it in a way that it's built to the standards that are required and can actually be used in financial services applications. So cybersecurity, privacy, et cetera. Last quarter of last year, we saw $3.5 billion raised with ICOs. Bitcoin, if those of you who have bought and hodled in the space, you know how big the drop was, and yet we saw the biggest ICO ever, Telegram, raise $850 million, which is about a quarter of what we saw in the last quarter as a total. So the big problems that we're seeing in the space, there's a lot of them, and our focus is really to start picking off some of these different problems kind of one by one. So some of the tools that we're building, we kind of focus on what we call compliance infrastructure. So we're not trying to be the platform to do everything. We're trying to provide tools that will enable securities token platforms, will enable ICOs, will enable you, if you want to start a fintech platform, our ID KYC AML product is the easiest to implement. What Stripe did for payments, we've done that for the investor onboarding process. And we really focus on going beyond the crypto world as well. So we have clients that might not just be ICOs, but clients that are actually in mainstream financial services using these same tools. So where's the market going, and kind of the vision of why are we spending our time on this space, not spending all our time cycling around the countryside and swatting mosquitoes? True story. The growth in this space is huge. Based on what the CFTC said is one possible extrapolation of where the market could go, it works out to about $1 trillion per month over the next 2 years. So very few scenarios you'll run into that space. For those of you in the tech world, they're like, okay, how does this work? Where do you guys fit into all of this? You may have heard of some of these companies in the space. We're very much focused on building base layer tools that will enable the space. So low margin, low cost products that will actually enable people to build a fintech platform and get it out there, acquire users, and take some of the friction out while enhancing security, enhancing compliance, and actually maybe doing things. If blockchain is supposed to be cheaper, faster, better, more secure, you can own things, maybe actually actualizing some of those scenarios, because I'm sure if you have bought into some of these projects, you're like, oh, it's supposed to be cheaper, and then you see your Ether gas price and you're like, well, wait, my bank charges me 50 cents and this is like $20 for a transaction. So how do we make sure that these things are done in a way that's also efficient from a financial sense? The focus of what we've really focused on, our core product is called Facto, which you saw on the last slide, and on the right there. And what that product is really focused on is we're the only ones in the world that can do this. And we, as the gentleman, the IP attorney said, stake your claim. We've been very focused on doing that. And this product basically enables a token to inject the compliance and governance into the token on every single transaction. So an ERC-20, if you're familiar with Ethereum, can actually hit the market and go around and trade. And if it's not allowed to be traded with someone in the US because the issuer says, I don't want in the US, we didn't meet the regulation requirements of the US, it can't get into a wallet from a US owner. I don't have a timer, so someone's gonna have to give me a wave. So a little bit about some of the things that we're doing within the tools that we are building. One of the pieces that we just released was called iComply ID, which I mentioned before. And this has been something that if you have invested in any sort of ICO project, you probably, in the last 6 months, you probably had to give a copy of your passport, as an example. And I always like to say not every genius 13-year-old Ethereum developer needs a hard drive full of passports. And things like GDPR, if you saw the Facebook thing today, there's major problems in the space of cryptocurrency as well right now, where data is just kind of being bled out and people's information is being out there. So these are things that we're really problems that we're working very hard to solve. Matt kind of mentioned, we are hiring. If anyone is looking in the space, if you're an experienced developer, we are looking to hire several more people in the next couple of weeks. And we would love to work with some top Vancouver talent. And I think if you take a look at some of the people on our team as well, you'll be in very good company. It's a very exciting place to be. So I think we're around the 5-minute mark. Yeah? Any questions, or pass it off to the next? Questions? Yeah, any questions?
I'll start. Can you repeat them as well? What do most companies making issuing tokens and coins, what don't they understand about what's going on with regulation? Does everyone have to be complied? Is it what's the big misunderstanding in the market most entrepreneurs have?
Cool. So the question was, from our perspective, I'm guessing, what do we see as the biggest misconceptions that people who want to issue an ICO might have about compliance? Sum it up. So I think there's probably 3 things. The first one is what I call the security versus utility token distraction. It's not a security we issued out of Gibraltar, which brings me into my next question, or next point is, it doesn't matter where you issue from. The way regulations work in the financial world is it matters where the investor or stakeholder who's buying into it is. So if I'm issuing from Gibraltar, but somebody's investing from BC, I have to comply with BC regulation. And so that's the same thing globally. You need to have this cascading compliance for every jurisdiction that you accept funds from. And you need to make very, very, very sure that the people who are investing aren't skirting the system. And I'd say the third thing is people forget that they think that compliance is, we'll just help you with issuance and we'll make sure you get the documentation in order, et cetera. But the second that token trades from, I sell to this gentleman in the front row and he puts that on an exchange or sends it to someone else's wallet, I'm liable as the issuer. So that's the one thing that people don't understand is the way securities law works is the liability falls on me, the distributor of the token, which is how it works in the token world. And so I have to worry about the compliance for the entire life cycle that asset is in the marketplace. Any other questions?
Are you guys just following current compliance regulations to build out your products?
Yes, that's actually, we're not holding our breath waiting for legislation to change. We use existing rule sets, which is why we've been able to get OKs from North American securities regulators, currently, to my knowledge, the only ones in the world to receive that so far, to say, let's actually raise using these existing rule sets, because we're not changing anything within what's already being written. We're just doing it with, instead of keeping a spreadsheet for your share registry, we're using a distributed ledger. So we're really just changing the database technology, and that's kind of our approach on it. Now, there's a lot of rules around when you send that share certificate to someone, how that's done, and that's the whole focus of compliance. But yeah, we're focusing on building to spec of current regulations rather than hoping one day that the whole world opens up the token marketplace, which if it does, would be awesome, but not today. Anyone else?
Yeah, the limiting by geography seems like an easy use case. What about like preventing people from starting a Ponzi scheme or inside trading or something like that?
Ooh, insider trading is one of my favorite ones. Well, maybe insider trading, box trading. I love talking to regulators. We've literally traveled the world and talked to regulators all around the world. Box trading is where you might want to pump up the trading volume of your stock and get 2 or 3 accounts going, and you just trade between those accounts. Insider trading, it could be any number of scenarios. Insider trading, that one's a little bit different, and there's actually fairly low on regulators' watch lists in the world the way it is today. Box trading is a problem that regulators might spend months researching to try to figure out what happened, and then try to figure out who is involved. The cool thing about blockchain is You just apply a light machine learning layer to that, and you just spot it immediately. So one of the tools that we're building out is regulatory enforcement and monitoring tools for regulators, because we really feel that if we want regulators to be okay with using this new way of raising capital, they need to be able to actually assess to make sure, oh look, you did actually tick the boxes that we required. Anyone else?
Just wondering for the KYC portion. For each ICO, are you helping them identify all the people that buy the token, or are you like partnering with exchanges to pull in their KYC information, or like are you relying on any identity partners?
Yeah, if you're going to issue a token as a security, every single, maybe this is number 4 to what misconceptions, every single exchange on the market right now is not able to hold your token legally. Because they have no license to transact with securities. So we can't integrate. And the other thing I will say is most of the exchanges and most of the KYC processes that are out there do not meet the requirements of the financial standards. So if you just try going to one of these sites and try to cheat it, you'll be surprised how many of them are quite easy to do so. So our focus on KYC is to use it to the same standard, which we actually built internally, because we could use some of the existing players, but it was actually very expensive, which we pass off to the issuers. So we've literally gone down to the bottom layer and built out the core product ourselves, which makes us one of the most cost competitive solutions on the market. And we actually don't just cover, normally KYC in the traditional finance world covers who the individual is, and it's about, are you on a government watch list, are you a politically exposed person, all sorts of different things like that. We're not just checking to see OCR, does your document match your name, is this a real US passport, all these different things. But we're also checking your wallet itself. Has this wallet been involved in criminal activity, and these funds? So we actually do what's called blockchain forensic in our KYC and AML process. And currently we're the only...
individuals or entities?
Both.
You can KYC
Yeah.
entities?
The idea is to do both, yeah. And one of the things that we're working to release next is actually any ICO using our system has to KYC their company in order to prove that you're actually investing in a company that exists, and this is the registration number in the Irish corporate registry, as an example.
I've got to follow on that.
Okay.
One more question.
I'm just curious, are you going to make that available for dApps to utilize?
Yeah, so awesome question. The KYC product, the first customers weren't ICOs. We actually built out the API, and we're doing an iframe that an ICO can plug and just literally paste right into their token sale page. But the idea is that we want it to be leveraged in other places, even beyond the blockchain world today, because if we can have, some of our investors are traditional financial institutions that are they're like, wait, that tool is better than what we have right now. We want to implement that in our system, which is great for us because our goal is to bridge that gap. And if we can make it so that their investors are already familiar with this process, then it's very easy for them to start engaging into the crypto securities world. I think that's it on the questions.
Cool. Thank you so much.
That's good.